The courtroom fell into silence. Every ticking second echoed through the marble walls. No one dared to breathe. The veteran's voice wasn't loud, but it carried something deeper, something raw and unshakable. The judge, a woman known for her cold, commanding tone, found herself unable to respond. Her eyes locked on the man standing before her, the man she once knew, and wished she had never forgotten. He stood in his worn army jacket, a small brace peeking from under his pant leg, showing the cost of the war he once fought. But there was no weakness in his eyes, only purpose. The single dad who had seen too much of the world's pain was now standing in a courtroom, asking not for money, not for sympathy, but for a chance to heal someone else's child. The judge's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her gavel. "Mr. Carter, what did you just say?" He took a deep breath, his gaze steady. "I said I can make your daughter walk again." And that was how it began, the story that no one in that town would ever forget. Years earlier, before the courtroom, before the promise that stunned everyone, John Carter's life had already been a battlefield long after the war ended. A former army medic and single father, he lived in a small-town clinic that barely paid his bills. His daughter, Lily, had been his reason to keep breathing after his wife died while he was deployed. He spent nights fixing broken prosthetics, volunteering to help veterans, and sometimes patching up kids who fell from their bikes, never asking for a dime. But one rainy evening, everything changed. A black car pulled up outside his clinic. A woman in a suit stepped out, stern, powerful, and yet her eyes were heavy with pain. It was Judge Evelyn Moore, the same judge who had once sent John's brother to prison years ago. She didn't come as a judge that night. She came as a mother. Her daughter, Anna, had been in a car accident 3 years earlier. She hadn't walked since. The best doctors, the most expensive treatments, nothing had worked. Evelyn had spent every dollar, every prayer, and every night whispering apologies into the dark. Please, God, just let her walk again. When she entered John's clinic, she didn't expect hope. She just wanted to try one last thing before giving up. John looked over the medical file, his hands steady, eyes scanning every line. Then he looked up. "Who told you about me?" "Dr. Evans from the Veterans Hospital. He said you've been working on something new, some kind of therapy." John nodded. "It's experimental. But it's not just physical therapy. It's retraining the mind, and the heart." Evelyn frowned. "My daughter's spine was crushed, Mr. Carter. Not her heart." John met her gaze evenly. "Sometimes the body only follows what the heart believes possible." That sentence lingered in her mind for days. When Anna arrived the next morning, she barely looked up. Pale, fragile, her wheelchair carrying not just her body but years of disappointment. John crouched beside her, smiled gently, and said, "Hey, you like music?" She shrugged. "Used to." "Well," John said, turning on a small speaker, "you're gonna like it again." For weeks, he worked with her, singing while she moved her hands, tapping rhythm to train her muscles, telling her stories about soldiers who learned to walk again after losing everything. Slowly, Anna began to laugh. Then she began to hope. And that's when Evelyn noticed something she hadn't seen in years, light in her daughter's eyes. But hope wasn't enough. When the hospital board found out John was using unapproved therapy methods, they shut him down. The case went to court, and Evelyn, torn between her duty as a judge and her love as a mother, had to preside over it. That's where the story opened. John standing in front of her, not defending himself, but defending Anna's right to try. "Ma'am," he said softly, voice cracking just enough to sound human, "I've seen men walk again after their bones turned to dust. I've seen them crawl out of their graves because someone believed in them. If you'll let me, I can help your daughter do the same." The courtroom went silent. Every person there knew what that meant. He was risking his license, his freedom, everything. Evelyn swallowed hard. "Why?" she whispered. Why would you risk everything for her? John's eyes softened. Because I know what it's like to watch someone you love give up. I couldn't save my wife, but maybe I can save your daughter. Her gavel fell, echoing through the hall. Case dismissed. That night, Evelyn sat beside Anna's bed, tears falling silently. You're going back to him tomorrow, she whispered. The next months were hard. Painful. Grueling. But one evening, under the golden light of sunset, John stood at the end of the clinic hallway and said, Anna, just one more step. She shook her head, sobbing, legs trembling under the braces. I can't. Yes, you can, he said, voice firm but kind. You've already taken your first one. You just didn't notice. And then, with shaking hands gripping the bars, Anna took one more step. And another. Evelyn dropped to her knees, crying into her hands. John just smiled quietly, tears in his own eyes. Months later, during a local fundraiser, the mayor asked John to speak. But he refused. Instead, he let Anna walk onto the stage herself. The crowd stood, clapping and crying as the young girl smiled, her braces shining under the lights. In the audience, Evelyn looked at John, the man she once saw as a stranger, now the reason her daughter could stand again. When the applause faded, she whispered to him, You didn't just make her walk, John. You made me believe again. He smiled faintly. Ma'am, that's all I ever wanted. And in that moment, the crowd didn't just see a veteran or a judge. They saw what happens when faith, love, and compassion walk side by side, one step at a time.